If Bernard gets his own video, Hildegard deserves one too. So that's what this is. Then after this, I promise I'll deal with the rest of our historical figures in a briefer fashion. Okay, so Hildegard was a contemporary of Bernard's, and she was also pretty involved in politics. So she does provide this interesting comparison with him. She was also one of the most brilliant minds of the Middle Ages. She left her mark in just an incredible variety of disciplines, including, theology, music, medicine, literature. She kept correspondence with members of the aristocracy and leaders within the church. And she launched a successful preaching tour at a time when this was like exceedingly rare for women to do so. She established 2 different monastic houses, and she was not afraid to publicly disagree with both political and ecclesial leadership. Okay, so let's start with just a brief biography of her life. She was born in the year 1098. So she was actually only 8 years younger than Bernard. But it should be noted, Bernard became very famous very young, as I mentioned in the last video, where Hildegard doesn't. She doesn't at all. She really doesn't become famous until she's in her 40s. So there's definitely kind of a lapse between when Bernard becomes well-known and when Hildegard becomes well-known, even though they're roughly the same age. Okay, so she was born in Germany, or what would become Germany eventually. She was the 10th child of noble parents, kind of lower nobility, which has long led to the assertion that she was given to the church as a tithe as a child. I actually don't think that's true at all. I'm not going to get into all the reasons, but I actually disagree with that. So the details, though, of how and when Hildegard was dedicated to the church are a little bit unclear, but we do know she was turned over to the care of a young noblewoman named Jutta of Spanheim when she was 8 years old. When Hildegard was 14, she and Jutta, and likely another woman also named Jutta, who was acting as their servant, entered into an anchor hold at a newly constructed men's monastery at Dissen-Bodenberg. Okay, it was a Benedictine monastery. Today, the monastery is in ruins; it's gone. But archaeologists have found evidence of what they think was Hildegard's cell, and they think it was probably like 2 rooms and like maybe a small courtyard. Okay. And it was her teacher and companion, Jutta of Spanheim, that really seemed to embrace sort of this fanatical anchoritic life. Jutta was a practitioner of extreme forms of penance. In modern terms, I think we would, say her activities bordered on self-harm. But in her time, people were really, really impressed with her, and they believed it to be very holy behavior. So visitors came from all over to their cell. Jutta offered counsel and prayer and healing. It's kind of one of these great ironies of being a medieval anchoress, that by confining oneself, a woman was able to take on a very public ministry. As Jutta's reputation as a holy woman spread, people would come with their daughters and ask Jutta to take their daughters into the anchor hold. Okay, so eventually, it wasn't big. The small anchor hold could not accommodate these girls that were being brought to them. So at some point, the anchor hold was taken down. We actually don't know when this happened. And from that point on, we basically have kind of like a women's monastery being housed within a larger men's monastery. Okay, so it wasn't kind of like a true like double monastery that we see sometimes in places. It's a little bit different here. Okay. Jutta died in the year 1136 when Hildegard was 38 years old. Immediately after that, the women in their kind of small community voted that Hildegard replace Jutta as their leader. Because of the kind of interesting nature of the monastic community, she was not declared an abbess, but a magistra or a teacher. 5 years later, though, Hildegard had a really powerful mystical experience that completely changed her life, changed the direction of her life, of the nuns with her, through this vision, which is recorded in the preface of Scivias, and I have it below. She gained an understanding of divine revelation. This revelation articulates a phenomenon that is known as an intellectual vision. Basically, in an intellectual vision, the recipient receives a supernatural understanding of a topic, which in Hildegard's case is mainly a profound understanding of scripture. Okay, there have been other mystics who've claimed this sort of experience, though it is pretty rare even within mysticism. Okay, I'm going to read it because I didn't assign this, and it's really, really interesting actually. It happened that in the 1141st year of the incarnation of the Son of God, Jesus Christ, when I was 42 years old and 7 months, heaven was opened and a fiery light of exceeding brilliance came and permeated my whole brain and inflamed my whole heart and my whole breast, not like a burning, but like a warming flame, as the sun warms anything its rays touch. And immediately I knew the meaning of the exposition of the scriptures, namely the Psalter, the Gospels, and the other Catholic volumes of both the Old and the New Testaments. All right, so not only did Hildegard receive this intellectual vision, but she also received a direct command from God in which she was told that she must share these visions with others. That vision she also recorded that says, "Thus, therefore, O humans, speak these things that you see and hear, and write them not by yourself or by any other human being, but by the will of him who knows, sees, and disposes of all things in the secrets of his mysteries." Okay, so she's receiving this direct command, and even with this direct command to share her visions, she's really scared to do so. Okay, in this time and place, sharing mystical visions can be dangerous if church leadership believes that these visions are false, and she had reason to kind of tread carefully, all right? It was only after bouts of extreme illness and seeking approval of different ecclesial authorities, including the supervisors of her monastery, Bernard of Clairvaux, and the Pope, that she began to write. And then when she started to write, she just didn't stop. All right, Scivias is her best known work, which consists of 26 different visions and then a theological explanation of each vision. The visions, frankly, can seem really wondrous and strange, even with her theological explanations. In this class, you're reading her description of the Trinity. I think this is a great example sort of the otherness of her visions, but I would also argue that it's fairly theologically grounded, okay? In it, the three persons of the Trinity appear first as like a man of sapphire, then a gentle glowing fire, and then also a bright light, okay? But I'm not going to read it because you're going to read it. All right. So not only did Hildegard's visions prompt her to speak out and write, they prompted her to become a leader. In 1150, while she was writing Scivias, Hildegard really felt God calling her to establish her own monastery, which the monks at Dissing-Bodenberg were very against. But she took 20 nuns and their priest and confessor named Volmar, and they moved to Rupertsberg, overlooking Bingen on the Rhine, where she lived for the next 33 years. In 1165, her convent was so crowded, she established a second one on the other side of the Rhine, and she would cross the river twice a week and visit the nuns at the other convent for the next 14 years until her death. As her career continued, she wrote lots of different things. She wrote the first morality play, 3 major works of theology. She wrote an encyclopedia called 9 Books on the subtleties of different kinds of creatures, which included herbal remedies and other medical information, a bestiary, and information on a variety of natural things such as plants, elements, metals, things like that. She followed up this with a handbook called Causes and Cure, which cures, as the title suggests, was a book of medical knowledge of the time. She died in the year 1179. And it took a while for her canonization. And by a while, I mean over 800 years. She was finally declared a canonized saint in the year 2012. And later that year, she was declared a doctor of the church. So I actually put up the official Vatican announcement of her canonization, of her announcement as being a doctor of the church, which is really, really interesting. Pope Benedict XVI is the one who approved it. And he writes in the letter how he had been part of the German church officials in 1979 that had requested that John Paul II actually make her a doctor of the church, and he didn't. But of course, Benedict does it once he becomes Pope himself. All right, that's all I've got for you on Hildegard. Thanks, everyone.